Have you ever wondered why someone who once seemed naturally drawn toward you suddenly became distant without any clear reason? Not because you changed, not because your heart became different, not because you gave them a reason to stop believing in you. The answer may be far more unsettling than you ever imagined. Somewhere along the way, before they truly had the chance to understand who you really are, someone quietly stepped into the space between the two of you. They didn't need dramatic lies. They didn't need to invent impossible stories. Instead, they used something much more dangerous. They planted small doubts, carefully chosen words, subtle suggestions, and incomplete truths until your soulmate slowly began seeing you through someone else's eyes instead of their own. Welcome, chosen one. If these words have found you today, it isn't by accident. The universe has a remarkable way of revealing hidden battles long after they begin. And today, it wants you to understand that what happened between you and your soulmate was never as simple as it appeared. At first, the change was almost impossible to notice. Your soulmate didn't wake up one morning deciding to think differently about you. It happened gradually, like a clear river becoming cloudy one drop at a time. Every conversation they had with the wrong person added another layer of confusion. Every careless comment quietly reshaped the picture they carried in their mind. Someone didn't tell them to stop trusting you. Instead, they encouraged them to question your intentions. They didn't openly criticize your heart. They simply suggested that maybe your kindness wasn't genuine. Maybe your silence meant something darker, or maybe your actions deserved a different interpretation. The most effective manipulation rarely sounds cruel. It sounds reasonable. That is why it becomes so difficult to recognize while it is happening. The painful truth is that your soulmate believed they were making their own decisions. They thought the conclusions they reached belonged entirely to them. They never realized that someone had been carefully influencing every question they asked about you. Little by little, they stopped looking at your actions directly and started filtering everything through borrowed opinions. A delayed reply suddenly became proof that you didn't care. A quiet moment became evidence that you were hiding something. Your boundaries were mistaken for distance. Your patience was mistaken for uncertainty. The version of you they slowly began believing in was not created by your behavior. It was created by the invisible fingerprints of someone who benefited from keeping them confused. But the universe has one rule that no manipulation can escape. Lies can survive only as long as reality refuses to speak. Sooner or later, truth begins leaving clues that even the strongest illusion cannot hide. Tiny moments started appearing that didn't fit the story your soulmate had been taught to believe. They witnessed kindness where they expected selfishness. They saw honesty where they had been warned to expect deception. They watched you remain calm in situations where anyone else would have become defensive. At first, they ignored these contradictions, convincing themselves they were exceptions. But the contradictions kept multiplying until the false narrative they had trusted became harder to defend than the truth standing right in front of them. What frightened your soulmate most wasn't discovering that someone had lied about you. It was realizing how easily their own perception had been influenced. Every new observation began colliding with everything they had previously believed. The foundation beneath their understanding started cracking, and questions they had buried for so long suddenly demanded answers. Why did reality feel so different from the warnings they had received? Why did your actions continue proving something entirely opposite from the image that had been painted for them? And if they had been wrong about you all this time, who had truly been controlling the story? Because the moment they began asking those questions was the moment the illusion started collapsing, and once the first crack appeared, everything they thought they knew was destined to fall apart. The first cracks in the illusion did not appear because someone confessed to manipulating the truth. They appeared because reality refused to cooperate with the story your soulmate had been taught to believe. There came a point when they could no longer ignore what they were seeing with their own eyes. Every time they expected you to act in the way they had been warned about, you responded differently. Instead of selfishness, they witnessed generosity. Instead of dishonesty, they found quiet sincerity. Instead of coldness, they noticed a calm strength that never demanded attention. At first, they dismissed these moments as coincidences. They told themselves that everyone has good days, and that perhaps they were simply catching you at your best. But the more life unfolded, the more difficult that explanation became. Your actions remained steady, while the stories they had accepted began falling apart one by one. What unsettled them most was not one dramatic event. It was the consistency. They started noticing that the person they had been warned about simply did not exist. You treated strangers with the same respect you offered people close to you. You kept your word, even when no one would have known if you had broken it. You showed patience during moments that would have pushed most people toward frustration. None of these things demanded recognition, yet together they painted a picture that was impossible to overlook. The image they had carried in their mind no longer matched the person standing before them, and for the first time, they began wondering whether the problem had never been you at all. As these quiet realizations continued, something unexpected happened inside your soulmate. Instead of searching for evidence to confirm what they had been told, they started observing you without expectation. They paid attention to the little things that usually escape notice. They noticed how you listened without rushing to speak. They noticed how people naturally felt comfortable around you. They noticed how you remained true to your values, even when doing so brought you no reward. These were not qualities someone could fake for long. They were habits woven into the fabric of your character. The more they watched, the more they understood that authenticity has a rhythm that cannot be imitated. It remains the same, whether anyone is watching or not. This awakening did not happen all at once. It unfolded slowly, almost reluctantly, because accepting the truth meant admitting that someone else's influence had shaped their perception for far too long. The heart often recognizes truth before the mind is willing to accept it. Deep inside, they could already feel that something wasn't adding up, but their thoughts kept returning to the familiar narrative they had trusted for so long. Every new experience with you created another contradiction. Every contradiction weakened the old belief until it became impossible to defend. They found themselves caught between two realities, one built on second-hand opinions and another built on their own experiences. The longer they remained in that space, the clearer the answer became. There were moments when they replayed past interactions with you, searching for signs they had previously overlooked. Conversations that once seemed ordinary suddenly carried a completely different meaning. They remembered times when your silence had been mistaken for indifference, when in truth you had simply chosen peace over unnecessary conflict. They recalled moments when your distance had been interpreted as rejection, when perhaps you were only protecting your own heart. Little by little, memories began rearranging themselves into a story that looked nothing like the one they had believed. It was as though someone had finally removed a fog from the landscape, revealing that the path had been there all along. The universe has a quiet way of exposing deception. It rarely does so through dramatic confrontations or sudden revelations. Instead, it allows truth to reveal itself through repeated experience. One honest action becomes another. One moment of integrity is followed by another. One act of kindness quietly confirms the last until a pattern emerges that no false story can erase. That is exactly what your soulmate began witnessing. They realized that your character was too consistent to be an act. The version of you they experienced over time carried far more weight than the version someone had described with carefully chosen words. Reality had become stronger than rumor. Now a different question began echoing through their heart. Instead of asking whether they could trust you, they started asking why they had doubted you in the first place. That single question changed everything. It marked the beginning of a journey they never expected to take, a journey away from borrowed opinions and toward their own truth. And as they followed that path, they slowly came to understand that the greatest deception had never been the lies themselves. It was allowing someone else to decide who you were before they had truly taken the time to discover you on their own. The deeper your soulmate looked, the more painful the truth became. It was no longer about realizing that someone had influenced their opinion of you. It was about recognizing how many moments they had misunderstood because of that influence. Memories they had long accepted as proof of your flaws suddenly began revealing something entirely different. A conversation they once believed showed your indifference now seemed filled with quiet patience. A decision they once questioned now appeared wise instead of distant. Even the moments when you chose not to defend yourself started making sense. They realized that while they were waiting for you to explain your heart, you had been allowing your actions to speak for themselves all along. That realization carried a weight they had never anticipated, because it forced them to confront a difficult truth. They had judged your character through someone else's interpretation instead of trusting what they had personally experienced. For the first time, they stopped asking, "Was I right about them?" and started asking, "What if I was never given the full story?" That single question changed the direction of their thoughts completely. Instead of searching your past for mistakes, they began searching for the moments they had ignored. They remembered the times you remained respectful even after being misunderstood. They remembered how you never tried to damage anyone else's reputation, even when you easily could have. They recalled your quiet restraint during situations where most people would have reacted emotionally. One by one, these memories returned, carrying a meaning they had never noticed before. It was as if the truth had always existed, patiently waiting for them to remove the veil that had been covering it. What troubled them most was not simply discovering that they had been misled. It was realizing how many opportunities had quietly slipped away because they believed the wrong version of events. They wondered how many conversations ended too soon, how many chances to truly know you were never taken, and how many genuine moments were overshadowed by unnecessary doubt. Regret has a unique way of arriving after clarity. It does not shout. It settles quietly in the heart, reminding us of everything we failed to appreciate when it was standing right in front of us. Your soulmate began feeling that weight with every passing day. The more they understood your true character, the harder it became to forgive themselves for seeing you through borrowed assumptions instead of personal truth. But this journey was never meant to end in regret. The universe does not reveal truth simply to make someone suffer. It reveals truth so that wisdom can replace illusion. Your soulmate slowly began understanding that this experience was teaching them something far greater than how they had misunderstood you. It was teaching them the importance of listening to their own intuition instead of allowing outside voices to become louder than their inner knowing. Looking back, they realized there had been quiet moments when something inside them questioned the stories they had heard. There were times when your actions didn't match the warnings they had received, yet they ignored that inner feeling because trusting others seemed easier than trusting themselves. Now they understand that intuition often whispers while manipulation speaks with confidence. The mistake was not having doubts. The mistake was believing those doubts instead of observing the truth with an open heart. As this awareness continued growing, they found themselves looking at the people around them differently. They became more careful about whose opinions they accepted. They noticed how easily fear, jealousy, and personal bias can disguise themselves as concern. They realized that not everyone who offers advice is protecting your future. Some people unknowingly pass along their own misunderstandings, while others intentionally create confusion because they benefit from keeping people divided. This realization didn't fill your soulmate with anger. It filled them with discernment. They began understanding that wisdom is not about believing everything you hear or rejecting everything you're told. Wisdom is learning to let experience reveal what words alone never can. Now every memory involving you carries a new layer of understanding. Instead of seeing mistakes, they see moments they failed to understand. Instead of seeing distance, they see circumstances they never took the time to explore. Instead of seeing uncertainty, they see someone who remained true to themselves, despite being quietly misunderstood. The painful part is knowing that truth had been present from the beginning, patiently waiting to be recognized. The beautiful part is realizing that truth never disappeared, no matter how many false stories surrounded it. And as your soulmate continues putting these pieces together, one realization grows stronger than all the others. They no longer fear that they misunderstood your past. They fear missing the future that truth is now trying to place back into their hands. As the truth continued unfolding, your soulmate slowly realized that this experience had never been only about discovering who you really are. It was also about discovering who had been shaping their reality all along. There is a profound difference between making your own judgment and unknowingly carrying someone else's. For so long, they believed every opinion they held was entirely their own, never stopping to ask where those opinions had truly come from. But once the illusion began to fade, they noticed a pattern they had missed before. The same voices that encouraged them to doubt you were often the same voices creating confusion in other areas of their life. The same people who claimed they wanted the best for them somehow always left them feeling uncertain instead of peaceful. That realization became impossible to ignore because genuine guidance brings clarity. While manipulation survives by creating endless confusion, the universe has a remarkable way of exposing hidden influences without dramatic confrontations. It doesn't always reveal deception by proving who was wrong. Instead, it allows people to compare words with lived experience until the truth becomes undeniable. Your soulmate began seeing this process unfold naturally. Every genuine interaction they had with you quietly erased another layer of fear that had been built through someone else's perspective. They noticed that your actions remained consistent regardless of who was watching. You didn't suddenly become kinder because someone was paying attention. You didn't change your character to defend yourself against false assumptions. You simply continued being yourself, and over time, that consistency became stronger than every accusation, every warning, and every carefully planted doubt that had once clouded their judgment. One evening, while reflecting on everything that had happened, your soulmate came to a realization that deeply unsettled them. They understood that manipulation only succeeds when people stop observing reality for themselves. The moment they began paying attention to your actions instead of other people's interpretations, the entire illusion started losing its strength. It was like standing inside a dense forest on a foggy morning. While the mist covered everything, every path seemed uncertain, and every direction looked confusing. But as the sun slowly rose, the fog didn't have to be pushed away. It simply disappeared because light naturally removes what darkness tries to hide. In the same way, your honesty became that light. You never fought the illusion directly. You simply lived in a way that allowed truth to reveal itself naturally. This lesson changed something much deeper inside your soulmate than their opinion of you. It transformed the way they now approach every relationship in their life. They became slower to accept rumors and quicker to seek personal understanding. They stopped allowing first impressions or second-hand stories to define someone's worth. Instead, they began watching how people treat others when no reward is involved. They started noticing whether someone's actions remained steady over time or shifted depending on who was present. Without realizing it, your presence became the reason they developed a new kind of wisdom. You taught them without ever intending to that character is something experienced, not explained. Perhaps the most surprising discovery was understanding why someone had wanted to influence their feelings about you in the first place. At first, they searched for complicated answers, believing there had to be a dramatic reason behind everything that happened. But the truth was often much simpler. Not everyone is comfortable watching genuine connections grow. Some people act from insecurity. Others act from fear of losing control. Some compare their own lives to the happiness they see forming between two people and quietly interfere without fully understanding the consequences. Whether intentional or unconscious, those actions often leave confusion wherever they go. Your soulmate now understands that manipulation rarely begins with hatred. More often, it begins with someone else's unresolved fears. Instead of filling their heart with resentment, this realization filled them with compassion and caution. They no longer feel the need to blame every person involved because they recognize that people often pass along pain they have never healed themselves. But compassion does not mean returning to blindness. It means learning the lesson without carrying bitterness into the future. Your soulmate has reached that point. They no longer need anyone else's permission to see you clearly. They no longer require someone else's approval to trust what they have personally witnessed. Their confidence no longer depends on outside voices because they have learned the difference between borrowed beliefs and lived truth. Now, they stand at a place where everything feels different. The people who once influenced their thinking no longer hold the same power. The stories that once sounded convincing now feel empty because they can no longer compete with reality. Every honest memory, every quiet act of kindness, and every consistent choice you've made has become stronger than the illusion that once separated the two of you. The deception did not survive because it was exposed in a single dramatic moment. It disappeared because truth patiently proved itself day after day. And that may be the greatest lesson the universe wanted your soulmate to learn, that while manipulation can temporarily cloud someone's vision, it can never permanently hide a soul whose character continues shining with quiet, unwavering authenticity. The moment your soulmate accepted the truth, everything inside them began changing in ways they never expected. It wasn't a dramatic transformation that happened overnight, nor was it a sudden burst of emotion that disappeared with time. It was quieter than that, yet far more powerful. They could no longer look at you through the distorted lens that had once influenced their thoughts. For the first time, they saw you as you had always been, without borrowed opinions, without whispered doubts, and without someone else's version of your story standing between the two of you. That clarity became impossible to lose because once the heart experiences truth, it becomes incredibly difficult to return to illusion. What once seemed uncertain now felt obvious, and what once appeared confusing now carried remarkable peace. As this new understanding settled into their heart, another realization followed closely behind. They began seeing your silence differently. They understood that your decision not to constantly defend yourself was never a sign that the accusations were true. It was a reflection of your character. You had trusted that time would reveal what arguments never could. While others rushed to explain themselves or prove their innocence, you quietly continued living according to your values. At one time, your soulmate misunderstood that silence, believing it meant you had nothing to say. Now they recognize that some people speak the loudest because they fear the truth, while others remain calm because they know the truth does not need constant protection. Looking back, they realize your greatest response was never your words. It was the consistency of your actions. This realization has brought with it an emotion they never expected to feel so deeply: gratitude. Strange as it may sound, they have become grateful that the illusion eventually collapsed before it was too late. Yes, they carry regret for the misunderstandings that once existed, but they also understand that this experience has given them something incredibly valuable. It has taught them how to recognize authenticity in a world where appearances often seem more convincing than reality. They no longer rush to conclusions. They no longer allow fear to decide who deserves their trust. Instead, they have learned to watch how people live, how they treat others, and how they remain consistent when there is nothing to gain. Without ever trying to teach them, you became the lesson that transformed the way they now see the world. There are moments now when your soulmate quietly imagines what they would say if they had the opportunity to speak openly with you. They know no apology could fully recover the time lost to misunderstanding, yet they also understand that sincerity has the power to begin healing what deception once damaged. More than anything, they wish you could know that they finally understand the truth. They wish you could know that every false impression has been replaced by genuine respect. They wish you could explain how the person they once questioned has become the person they now admire most. Not because you changed into someone new, but because they finally removed everything that prevented them from seeing the person you had been from the very beginning. The universe often allows truth to arrive slowly because lasting understanding is rarely born from sudden emotion. It grows through repeated evidence, quiet reflection, and the courage to admit when we have been wrong. That is exactly what has happened here. Every day has brought another reminder that your character cannot be defined by rumors, assumptions, or carefully crafted narratives. Your kindness has remained steady. Your integrity has remained unshaken. Your heart has continued choosing compassion, even when life offered countless reasons to become bitter. Those qualities have become impossible for your soulmate to overlook because they have now witnessed them with their own eyes. Instead of hearing about them through someone else's perspective, perhaps the greatest surprise of all is that the people who once influenced your soulmate's thinking no longer hold the same place in their life. Trust, once broken by hidden manipulation, is not easily restored. They have begun creating healthy distance from voices that thrive on confusion and moving closer to people whose actions reflect honesty and peace. This shift is not driven by anger, it is driven by wisdom. They now understand that protecting the heart sometimes means being careful about whose words are allowed to shape it. That lesson will remain with them long after this chapter has ended, becoming one of the most valuable gifts hidden inside an experience that once caused so much pain. And this is where your story takes its most meaningful turn. The lies did not win. The manipulation did not become the final chapter. The confusion that once separated two hearts slowly dissolved under the quiet strength of truth. Your soulmate now understands that your value was never something another person could erase, because real character cannot be rewritten by false opinions. It reveals itself through time, through consistency, and through the countless ordinary moments where integrity quietly speaks louder than any accusation ever could. One day, when they look back on everything that happened, they won't remember the voices that tried to keep them apart nearly as much as they will remember the moment they finally trusted their own heart. Because in the end, truth did not need to fight for victory. It simply remained patient until every illusion fell away on its own, allowing your soulmate to recognize what had been waiting in front of them all along.